Does anyone else remember that show from the 90s called What Not to Wear? No? Bueller? I'm just dating myself with these 90s references? Cool. Well, in the show, these two fashion-forward hosts would take the protagonist from frumpy to fab in the course of about a 42-minute show. And this week, I'm gonna do kind of my own version of that, called What Not to Film. Just go with me here. So this week, I am talking about what to do and what not to do when it comes time to turn on the camera. As I've said previously, I'm not going to spend a ton of the precious time that we have together talking about all the different equipment that I use, and I've talked about that in some other places, so if you're interested, you can check that out over here. But basically, most any phone or tablet should serve you fine, unless you're looking for something that's much higher production value. So moving on, once you've got your script or your storyboard that you've revised and honed and edited exactly how you want it, now it's time to hit record. I'll talk here about some of the filming do's and don'ts for some of the most common types of videos and how to take them from frumpy to fab in a few easy steps. So we're gonna start with the most important part of your video, which actually is the audio. Interestingly, even though video is a visual medium, people are actually more likely to stop watching your video if the audio is poor quality than if the video is poor quality. So it's really important to set up your audio correctly before you hit record. A peek behind the curtain, I have used a bunch of different microphones over the years. I've used the directional mic that's on the top of my camera. I've used lavalier microphones before. These are the ones that just clip to your shirt. I've used my USB microphone that I often use for podcasting. And when I'm in especially dire straits, sometimes I will just use the mic that's on my cell phone. It's actually pretty good. So to give you a sense of what some of the differences sound like, this is me talking into my lavalier microphone, which is clipped to my shirt just right out of frame. And this is what it sounds like when I'm using the audio from the directional mic that's located on the top of my camera. And this is what it sounds like when I'm using my USB microphone that I use for podcasting. And this is what it sounds like when I'm using the audio from my cell phone, which is just placed a few feet away from me. As you can probably hear, there are some pretty significant differences in how these microphones sound and also the amount of room noise they tend to pick up. So play around a little bit and figure out what type of microphone is going to work best for you. Pro tip, this lavalier microphone that I've used for most of my videos is actually really inexpensive and just plugs into the audio jack of my cell phone. So then I can just record directly using the Voice Memos app or other audio recording app on my phone, and it's worked really well and is pretty inexpensive. The point is that you don't need a degree in audio engineering or a bajillion dollars to get good audio these days. Okay, so now we're going to turn to setting up your camera to get good footage, specifically framing and lighting. So framing refers to how the subject, whether it's a person or an object, is framed within the image. And a good rule of thumb to use here, especially when you are new to filming, is what's called the rule of thirds. So if we take this clip of me talking here and we divide it into thirds, both vertically and horizontally, you'll see that I tend to keep my face, or the thing that I want you to focus on most in these videos, on the top horizontal line and one of the two vertical lines. Being slightly off center is actually fairly standard, and you might think it actually looks better than if I stand directly in the center of the frame like this. Similarly, your gut is probably just gonna scream no if I place my face up here or down here while filming. It just looks wrong, because it is wrong. So when you're setting up your shot, be sure to use the rule of thirds and also trust your gut. The second essential part of setting up your camera for success has to do with lighting. Basically, you want to just be thoughtful about where your light source is coming from and how it's hitting your subject. Direct light is probably going to wash them out, and an overhead light probably is going to be too shadowy, and backlight means that you probably won't be able to see their face very well, so you want to strike a balance. There are a zillion different videos out there explaining the different techniques involved in lighting somebody, but I think the key thing to consider here is just making sure that the person's face is well lit. Grab a desk lamp if you don't have a fancy lighting kit, or you can place them in a bright room with lots of natural light coming in the windows. Basically, if you just make sure the person looks well lit on camera and avoid lots of large changes in your lighting source, like when the sun comes in and out of the clouds, for example, you'll be in pretty good shape. I'm guessing that many of you are going to be doing the types of videos where someone is on screen for some length of time. Maybe you're doing a scripted direct-to-camera style or vlog style video like this. Or maybe you're doing an in-depth interview with someone who's important to the project or the topic that you're talking about. Regardless, if there's going to be a person on screen, there are a few things worth considering. Think about your surroundings. In general, you want to film somewhere quiet if you can, so avoid outside on a really windy day, or noisy cafes, or the really packed conference hall. You also want the space that you're recording in to be somewhat visually interesting, so you'll notice that I and a lot of other creators will film in front of a bookshelf. This is because bookshelves can be relatively interesting without being overly distracting. And plus you can infuse little bits of personality in there too. When you're filming out on a location, you might not have that much control, but in general, I would recommend avoiding stark white backgrounds. I've done this several times and have regretted it every time. What not to wear? Do not, I repeat, do not wear small patterned shirts like this. As you can probably see, it looks really weird and wobbly on camera. Generally, you want to go for colors of clothes that complement a person's skin tone. So for some skin tones, if you go too light, they might look washed out. And if you go too bold and bright for other skin tones, then they might look kind of odd or even fluorescent. In general, just advise people to pick clothing that complements their skin tone. Energy, energy, energy! You may feel like you're being energetic when you're saying your lines on camera, but the old adage about a camera adding 10 pounds needs to be adapted a little bit, I think, to emphasize that it also decreases the energy level by like a factor of 10. It's a thing. For example, this is me talking as if I were talking to one other person in a one-on-one conversation. You'll see that my movements are pretty subtle and I'm not really using my hands at all when I'm communicating, and also there's not a ton of vocal range. Now this is how I talk on camera. You'll notice that my voice changes a lot more and I use my hands to emphasize certain points. I feel a little like I'm flapping around like a bird, but in general it comes off on camera as fairly subtle. Or at least I hope it does. I also tend to speak with a little bit more emphasis on certain points that I'd like to make clearly. Basically, pretend that you're giving a presentation to a room full of people rather than talking to your camera alone in your office. It can feel kind of weird at first, but eventually you get used to it. For interviews, first off, be kind to your editors. Your video editor is going to have to review all of your interview footage, so there are a few things that you can do up front to help them, or your future self if you're editing your own videos, when you're doing interviews. First off, it can be really helpful to have a little bit of time before you turn on the camera to talk to the person you're interviewing to make them more comfortable. Perhaps you've already shared ahead of time the questions that you plan to ask them. I highly recommend this, by the way. Or maybe you've even had a pre-conversation where you've talked about some of the main points you'd like to capture in the interview. Now, as you settle into your recording time, it can be helpful to let your interviewee know that you might coach them a little bit along the way, or ask them to rephrase things or reiterate things that aren't quite clear. You might also request multiple takes of them answering the same question or making the same point. You might also ask them to repeat things with fewer uhs and ums. This will likely have the effect of making them feel a little bit uncomfortable on camera, so be sure to be complimentary and positive as much as possible. At the end of the day, you want them to feel as comfortable as possible with the filming process. When you first get the camera rolling, be sure to have your interviewee introduce themselves on camera and say a little bit more about what they do or how they're connected to the particular project or organization the video is about. You may not end up using this footage, but trust me, it is better to have it than to not have it. Then, after you hit record, the biggest, most important thing that you as an interviewer can do, keep your mouth shut. When we talk to others in normal conversation, we usually want to affirm what they're saying by saying something like, yeah, oh, I agree. Oh, that's super interesting. But guess what? Your mics will pick that up, and it is a pain in the butt to edit it out later. So it's best to stick with nods and smiles and other nonverbal cues that indicate that you're listening and are engaged with what the person is saying. Even better, when you're emoting heavily with your face and other nonverbal cues, the person who's on camera is more likely to be more emphatic that way as well. So what about when no one is on screen? Well, this is when B-roll, graphics, images, text, and animation come in handy. We'll go over a lot more details about these things in the next post, but B-roll refers to footage that you've collected along the way that is supplemental to the main point of the video, but helps you tell the story. So currently, you hear me talking. This is the disembodied voice phenomena. And while I'm talking, you see alternative footage that either underscores the point that's being made or simply provides something visually interesting to look at while the audio's going on. B-roll is really handy when it comes to editing, so it's always a good idea to get some. One B-roll recording tip: record for longer than you think you need. I used to record for like 10 seconds for B-roll, and that was never enough. So I usually aim for at least 30 to 40 seconds of whatever I'm recording so that I have enough that it's usable in editing. In terms of images and graphics and animations, I'll get into all of this more in a future post, but when you're looking at putting something visual into your video, you need to make sure that you have the rights to use it. Copyright is a really big deal and becoming even more of a big deal in the video world, but we'll talk about that next time. But images and graphics and animations can be really useful tools in your video storytelling. So this is by no means an exhaustive list of things to consider when you're filming, but it's a lot of the things I really wish I would have known when I first started. So now that I've thrown a ton of information at you about filming do's and don'ts, take some time to ponder the questions for the week and also get a jump start on doing some filming of your own. Thanks for watching. Again, if you're interested in some more one-on-one guidance on your own video making journey, I'd love to chat with you. I offer free 1-hour consultations via phone. You can hop over to my website to get signed up. Over there, you can also find some other great free resources about how to be on YouTube and some video production basics that you might find useful as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Now go forth and make some videos your way.